The Magnolia Plantation Gardens is arguably one of Charleston's most iconic destinations. In today's episode, I'm joined by Kayla Hoey, the PR manager, who shares insights into the location's very interesting history, the ecological significance, and the experience that awaits you as a visitor. Whether it's the history that draws you in, the ever-present wildlife, or that very famous Instagrammable bridge, there is something for everybody at Magnolia Plantation Gardens. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host and the founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma's Silver. Well, hello, Kayla. I'm so excited to chat with you. We are going to talk all things Magnolia Plantation Gardens today, but why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself, tell people what your role is at Magnolia, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I love to talk about Magnolia. I could go on forever. So my name is Kayla Hoey. I am the Public Relations Manager at Magnolia Plantation Gardens in Charleston, South Carolina.
Are you from Charleston? I mean, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm a transplant. I'm from Boston, and I moved down here last summer, so almost a year ago, to work in the special events space at Magnolia. So to help them produce their tentpole community events and, bringing some new things, help a little bit with some events that get hosted there. And I kind of transitioned more into marketing PR in the last few months, just looking at the needs of the business and trying to figure out how to engage locals and engage tourists and share all of the different things that there are to do at Magnolia, as well as celebrate our history and our place in Charleston's history. So it's been a fun ride. It's always something different. There's always something new going on. It's such a broad property. And so it's a really exciting place to work. And it's also just lovely to see people come and experience it for the first time. So I'm super happy. I love Charleston. I feel like it's very similar to Boston. So I've been able to kind of assimilate pretty easily.
I was just about to ask you that because I am a fellow Yankee. I'm in the Philadelphia area, but coming from the Philly region, and then I know in Boston, obviously there's a lot of history. So is that something that you knew going into like did that kind of attract you to the Charleston area? What was that cool?
I mean, I'm actually staring at a 1872 bird's eye view of Charleston map I have above my desk. So yes, absolutely. I'm kind of a history nerd, and I love all the parallels between a city like Boston and a city like Charleston. It just goes back so far, all the way to, before the American Revolution. Even Magnolia was established in 1679. So I just find the history of our country so interesting, and it's kind of fun to see the parallels between things that I learned growing up in Boston and, taking field trips to the Freedom Trail and kind of how that translates down here in the South too. It's a different narrative a little bit, but there's still so much crossover. So it's really interesting.
I love it. And I'm a fellow history nerd as well. My background is archaeology and anthropology, and then I opened a wedding planning company. So you and I probably have a lot more in common than
we have a lot to talk about. I did that too for a little while. So
yes. So, okay, one of the things that I found really interesting, I've always known about Magnolia Plantation. I love the Charleston area and its history. And when I was looking a little more into the ownership and history, I thought it was so cool because there was, a spouse from Philadelphia. But if you could, for people who, and I think most people don't really know the history of the plantation and gardens, so if you could kind of give us a little bit of what that looked like, how it all came to be, sort of the evolution. I know that's a very loaded question, right? Because it has such a long history, but sort of the evolution and how it has gotten to where it is today.
Yeah, so we are celebrating our 345th birthday this year.
Wow.
Obviously, the land has been there much longer, but the Magnolia story really starts in 1679. Stephen Fox purchased the land when he came from the Caribbean. They were looking for a place to plant things that they were familiar with planting. So they tried sugarcane, they tried cotton, they tried all sorts of things. And Magnolia is in a really unique location. It's right on the Ashley River. So there's a few different rivers in Charleston. We're on the Ashley. So parts of the property are super swampy and marshy. So what was working for them, where they had come from, wasn't really growing in Charleston. And so, through trial and error, they landed on rice and Carolina gold rice. I'm sure history buffs are familiar with that. That's what ended up working really well for them at Magnolia. And so they grew and sold Carolina gold rice really through to the end of the Civil War. And that's when the plantation and gardens, so to say, were born. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but that's like the basic history of the pre-Civil War Magnolia.
Mm-hmm.
But in around the 1840s, a man named Reverend John Drayton, he was the owner of the property. And I do have to say, this property has been in the same family the entire time it's been
Which
owned.
is
So
so neat. I love that.
we're the board of directors is, in the 10, 11, 12 range of generations of ownership of this property. So it's pretty rare that one family has owned the same property, especially here in Charleston, where things maybe get sold or their names change, or anything can really happen with these really large properties. But this has been the same family, which we're definitely proud of. And so in the 1840s, Reverend Drayton, he built the beautiful historic gardens that we have in a romantic style garden. And it's not just called romantic because he did it as an act of love for his Philadelphia born wife. He was trying to make something so beautiful that she wouldn't be homesick anymore. Basically, she was not thrilled about moving from Philadelphia, where she was a socialite and
Mm-hmm.
had her whole family, down to South Carolina, where she did not know anybody. So
Yeah,
he built her these
Charleston,
gardens.
Charleston was not on Southern Living's list yet.
No,
It was
it
not
wasn't. It
actively
was
killing at the time.
mosquitoes and humid. So she was not thrilled. She came. We think she came to love it. There's no outright written statement where she says, "I love it so much," but she raised her family here, and they did not move back. So we have to assume that she did grow to love it. But we are really one of the Lowcountry's oldest public attractions, one of the last standing romantic style gardens. And so this is something that's really different, that you might go to a botanical garden in Charleston, in the South, really anywhere you go, and they're super manicured, right? Like they've got the grass steps, they have really kind of planned out, mapped out gardens. That's not really what we have. And we do have more, I would say, innovative color display gardens, but the essence of our historical collection is a little bit more wild, a little bit more whimsical. And we really have worked to protect the original plans that Reverend Drayton put out in the 1840s and maintain them and curate them as best that we can. We have hundreds of species of camellias and azaleas. Some are even patented to Magnolia. This is the only place they'll grow.
Wow.
They're named after family members or visitors or important Charlestonians. So it's a really unique history in how the gardens came to be, and kind of the transformation of the property as well, and just the single family ownership. So that's, I would say, a little bit of a download and a quick history. Of course, we could dive into each family member's role, and you are so welcome to do that, through our website or by
Yeah.
coming to visit or in the archives. But I'd say that's a good start.
Amazing. Thank you. And I would agree. So I have not had the pleasure yet of coming to Magnolia. That is on my list for my next trip, but I just through pictures, right? I've been following for years. It's just beautiful to look at. I would say it is certainly more natural. And I think that's part of its allure, is that there are times when you want to go see something a little more manicured, but it's a very natural, ethereal setting is kind of what I sense even from just looking at pictures of it. So I think that is really neat. And I think that adds to the romance because it is sort of whimsical in that way. So I really appreciate that when I see it. Now, could you talk to us a little bit about I suppose some of the architecture or like the different ownership that the property has had, right? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's always been in the same family, as you mentioned. Reverend Drayton was the one who moved there. Was he already in the Charleston area and then he met his wife and then, because he wasn't up north, was he?
He was traveling when he met her,
Okay.
and he met her in Philadelphia. He was visiting family. And
Okay.
so when they got married in 1840, they moved down to Magnolia. And they kind of divided their time between the plantation home and the family home on South Bay, which is kind of downtown Charleston on the harbor. So this wasn't a year-round home at Magnolia really ever. This was more of a country home because
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it in that time, just driving 20 miles did not take 20 minutes like it does today. You know, you had to either go by horse and it could take a few hours, or you had to go by boat up the river. So it was more of a escape from the city than a year-round house. They met when he was up in Philadelphia visiting family, and then they moved down to Magnolia together.
In what ways did I mean, of course, familial ownership, but in what ways did they each like make their stamp or their mark on it? Or how did they personally contribute to perhaps the architecture or the landscape? What did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, each family member, had their own goals and desires for making the property their own, after the Civil War when it really became a tourist attraction. I would say pre-Civil War, it was really just an operating rice plantation. And so the house that people see in photos now, this is actually the third house. So the first house was in the 1600s. The second house was actually burned in the Civil War. And then the third house was erected. So I would say there have been some interesting ownership path, I guess, throughout the history. And one of my favorite people to talk about is Julia. And she was the sole female owner of Magnolia. Typically property is passed down to sons, but
Mhm.
this was Reverend Drayton's daughter. So she owned the plantation from 1891 until she passed away in 1920. And so her mother was the one who the gardens were built for. And
Okay.
so she was the first person that really had a true upstairs, downstairs in the home. She created different, more modern renovations to the home. And she also has her own camellia species on property. So I find that super interesting that she, in the late 1800s was this property owner of acres and acres and, so much land and this giant attraction for people. I just find that super impressive.
It is.
Um,
Yes.
it is. Yeah, absolutely. And then, it was passed down through sons as well. And another kind of notable couple that we like to talk about a lot was Sarah and C. Norwood Hasty. So they owned the property in more like the early 20th century, and they were huge hosts. They loved to entertain people who were coming to Charleston, from first ladies of presidents to military heroes. They had Henry Ford, Eleanor Roosevelt, Orson Welles. They had painters there. They were just very contemporary and loved to host out at their country home.
Mhm.
So we do like to talk about them and just kind of paint more of a picture of this really wasn't a full-time home. This was a place that the family would always retreat to enjoy the gardens, to maybe escape the heat of downtown Charleston because it can get super humid here. So every kind of couple who lived in the house has put their own twist on it. Most recently, kind of the last family to live in the house really was in the 70s. And that's when they decided to turn the house into more of a museum, kind of start to think about letting people into the house to see family artifacts, to learn about some history of Charleston, and to tour the house. And, since then, we've been doing that since the 70s, going and allowing people into the house on a tour with all sorts of artifacts from super far back, and learning a little bit about one of Charleston's oldest families.
Okay, very cool. Now, one of the things that I guess just piqued and this is, of course, especially not being from that area, we rarely hear about, like, you kind of hear about the notable families from your own region, right?
Mhm.
So, but I figure to entertain the likes of the Roosevelts, Orson Welles, were they sort of renowned as a family, as a name because of their plantation ownership? Or did they have like other notoriety within Charleston? How did they have those connections?
I think it was a little bit of both. And in Charleston, a lot of things are named after families who owned a lot of land, and maybe ran successful plantations. Middleton is a name that comes up a lot. Drayton is, the ownership of Magnolia. So I don't know exactly, but I have to assume that people who owned a lot of land for many years, and maybe had successful plantations pre-Civil War did have some notoriety in town, and they were the people who had maybe some more money. They could entertain people. They may have had multiple properties. So I'm not 100% sure, but I have to assume.
Okay. Yeah, that was just something I was thinking about because that's
Yeah.
an impressive guest list.
Right.
um, the other thing, now again, not the most familiar with the Charleston area, but is this the same Drayton family? Is it Drayton Hall?
So
Isn't
they're
that another?
related, but it's not the same owners, but they're definitely related. And we sit on Highway 61, which is outside of downtown Charleston, but it's in the historic Ashley River Plantation area. So
Mhm.
Drayton Hall, Magnolia, and Middleton are right next door neighbors to each other. We have to look at, maybe there's different cousins and things like that. And if we go far enough back in the family tree, I'm sure we can find exactly how they're related, but they were two separate owners.
So if we fast forward a wee bit, this obviously has lots of history. Can we talk a little about preservation and what that looks like for you as an organization?
Yeah, it is absolutely one of the pillars that we are really passionate about. And that's both preservation of the historic home, the land, and kind of the marsh area and swamp that we have, as well as slave dwellings from the enslaved population who really built Magnolia Plantation and Gardens as it stands today. They did all of the work, and we need to pay homage to that. So I can start there. And what we have done in the past 20 years or so is preserved and restored some of the slave dwellings that we had to look as they did in different parts of history throughout the 1800s and even early 1900s. And this is part of our From Slavery to Freedom tour, where we walk guests through the experience of the enslaved at Magnolia, share some of their stories and the impact they had on creating the gardens and the work that they did to grow rice and build the houses and tend to the animals and the land. And they are able to be walked through by any guest. The tour is part of our admission. We run it every single day that we're open, which is 7 days a week. And so it's really important to us that we restored those the right way and preserve them as much as we can. It's just an integral part of our history. And we did do a whole archaeological survey in that area. We found all sorts of artifacts from Kelowna ware, which is a type of, it's not necessarily pottery, but it's in that family, to other, maybe tools that they were using, and all sorts of things that were in that area. And so we are definitely protective of that and are constantly working to continue to preserve that area, and learn as much as we can.
Mhm.
We also are definitely very proud of the collection of family heirlooms we have in the Magnolia House, from some original china to very rare artwork, Bibles, things like that, furniture even from the 1800s and before. So we take very good care of that, and we preserve it as much as we can, as well as, the integrity of the gardens themselves and our historical camellia and azalea collections, and really honoring the plans of Reverend Drayton and what he wanted this garden to look like. It's kind of history that you can see and hold and touch and feel. And we are so proud of our history, and just want to share it with everyone. So preservation is very important to us.
In terms of Southern history and culture, and I think even, referencing the acknowledgement of how this, frankly, many Southern establishments came to be, slave culture. What context do you think Magnolia plays in the bigger picture, or even in Charleston? What does that look like?
I think keeping the name Plantation and Gardens is important. It shows that we want to acknowledge that history, that we're aware of it, and we want to educate on it. We try and host several events throughout the year. We have several partners in the South and beyond that, can come out and host a living history day with us and talk more about that, as well as just really using that From Slavery to Freedom tour to educate people about Magnolia specifically, because we can't speak for every historical structure in
Right.
town, but Charleston was one of the country's slave capitals. I mean, this was a port city, and so enslaved people did come into the port of Charleston and really built so much of our city and created the fortunes of these families. And so it's irresponsible to not address it, and it's irresponsible to not educate tourists and locals alike about what happened on our property and in our city. And so we are always focused on telling that story and not whitewashing it, and being as honest as we can with the history and the information that we have about the conditions and their contributions. You have to take the responsibility of learning about the place that you're visiting, and you can enjoy our nature train and our Audubon swamp while also recognizing that we use the engineering and irrigation systems that the enslaved set up to now create these oases for alligators and herons and birds and all sorts of things, and appreciate that it was pretty terrible conditions for them to be working in, but they have a legacy here, and it's important to honor that and educate yourself about it if you're going to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Magnolia as a habitat.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, because that's really interesting. I kind of forgot, of course, this natural setting that there are
Yeah.
things that live there.
And I think this is something that really makes us stand out, is that we have this Audubon Swamp Garden, and you can absolutely walk through it. There's trails and boardwalks, and it provides this type of access to these wild animals that I have not experienced anywhere else. And that's not just me saying that because this is where I work now, but it's almost like you are in their world. But it's not, we're not like populating these ponds with alligators and turtles and herons. We are letting it be. And, we might do different flooding in different areas just to help them, but we're really not touching these areas. They are wild cypress tupelo swamps. It is the access and close proximity to these animals. I can be 5 feet away from an alligator who is just sunning. He is just hanging out. I can see baby birds, baby great blue herons in their nest. We have so many wildlife photographers that just love this area because it is so truly wild, and it's just nothing I've ever seen before. You are just getting a peek into kind of these secret lives of these animals in a way that is so pure and so amazing. I mean, it does not get old to me to see an alligator, a baby one, a big one. They just go about their lives. And our ecology team has really done a lot to make it a habitable area for the entire life cycle of a bird. So maybe they don't need to migrate because they can live their whole life in our swamp and in our rookery. And, we try and protect this area so much so that alligators want to come here and nest here. And we don't, count them, chip them, anything. They are able to just live and be free here. And so it's a really interesting experience on top of, the history and the horticulture aspect. Our nature aspect is just incredible. And it's really, really cool.
It's really special right now too, because and I think most areas are seeing this. I'm sure Charleston, with how much popularity it's gained in even the last decade. I know in the Philadelphia suburbs, we see it. I think most people are seeing this, right? The intense just building, like land is so sacred right now because we're just plopping so much fresh construction on every like open blade of grass. And I think I often will talk about here. I mean, I'm about 45 minutes outside of the Philadelphia city, but even here, I'm in a it's quote unquote a city. It's pretty suburban and it's incredible though. I grew up next to a farm. And so I'm no stranger to the woods and deer and, a lot of wildlife. Where I am, I should not see as much wildlife as I do because they're being crowded out.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I'm going with this, I guess, is that it's really special to be able to have an area that is kind of sacred to nature. Because
And
there's so much growth.
Yeah, there's so much growth, and you see it downtown and you see it in, the smaller suburbs of the city. But something that I think is so beautiful and a little bit transformative is the way that you can get to this historic Ashley River Plantation area. There is only one road. It is Highway 61. That is the only way to get to these plantations and gardens.
Okay.
And that's a relatively, in the grand scheme of things, new highway. So when you're driving from downtown Charleston, or I come from the opposite way, I live in a smaller suburb of Charleston, you have to drive down this one lane city road, kind of. You've got the trees over sweeping the road. It almost gives you the time to start to get in the right mindset that you are stepping into history a little bit. You are able to escape the new construction, the new build, the craziness of the city, the traffic, and you start to get in that mindset of like, this is really old, special land. And you have that time on that drive down this one road to get there, to prepare you for that and to prepare you for the silence that you're going to experience, where it's just bird song and maybe some, bugs and things like that, and the wind whistling. And I think it makes it all the better. It makes it such a interesting experience because, even if you do visit a zoo in a city, or you visit a botanical garden in a city, sometimes you're still hearing those sirens. You're still hearing just city life. And that is not the case here. You are so isolated in a good way that you are able to immerse yourself in it. And I find that to be so unique to this area.
I love it. I mean, I think most people have a pretty firm grasp on this term, right? But for those who maybe are like not as familiar with Southern culture or Southern geography, can you just kind of outline when we say you're in the Lowcountry?
So the Lowcountry of South Carolina, it refers to the area really along the coast. So there's a lot of salt marshes. There's a lot of coastal waterways. It's actually low country. Like, our land is low. We are really
Your ocean level. Yeah.
We are ocean level. This was the area that, slave-based agricultural wealth really grew in rice and indigo. And so this hot subtropical climate, that is what low country really means. And so there's a lot of very specific cultural foods and traditions and things to this coastal South Carolina area, from the Gullah Geechee culture to, different subcultures as well throughout history. But that's really what what we're talking about when we say Lowcountry.
Perfect. Now, for those who are visiting specifically Magnolia Plantation Gardens, I would like to talk a little bit more about what that experience could look like depending on the time of year. So maybe we can go through this seasonally, but then also the different high points depending on why you feel it, because there is so much going on here, right? That I think you are either, hopefully you're visiting and you're getting a little blend of everything, but there are people who, you mentioned wildlife photographers. If so, whether you're a history buff, a nature lover, maybe even someone who is really particular about learning about architecture, or, kind of talk us through, maybe let's start, we're in spring.
Okay.
Let's talk season of spring and different high points depending on why you might be attracted to visit Magnolia.
Yeah. I mean, we are in bloom 365 days a year. There is always something blooming. And I think there is this preconceived notion that spring is the only time you can come and see flowers at a garden. And you can come and see certain flowers, that's for sure. But it's not the only time of year that flowers bloom for us. So if you are somebody who is really passionate about camellias and azaleas, yes, this is the time of year that they bloom. And we have a lot of them because that was what was originally planted back in the 1840s. So spring is a gorgeous time to come see camellias and azaleas on property. They're colorful, they're fragrant, they're gorgeous. This is also a really popular time for baby birds. So coming out to the Audubon Swamp and checking on the birds and seeing them, hatch from their eggs and start to explore their home. And they're really cute and they're really fluffy. And it's really interesting to kind of see their life cycle start. This is also a nice, mild time of year for us. We're sitting in the 60 to 70 degrees, so you're totally able to be outside really comfortably. And so that's always really nice. And so I'd say spring is a really nice time to see historical collections in our gardens and see some really pretty and active bird life. And so if once we move into summer, people get really nervous because it's humid here and they're like, well, what would I see? Like, what would I do? It's so humid. But there's summer plants and they're so pretty and it's so lush and green and gorgeous. And we have this boat tour that goes out on the Ashley River and it's an awesome time to come take the boat tour and, see the sunset and see all the types of wildlife that come out when it's nice and warm and the sun sets at 8:30 p.m. It's really incredible. And so I recommend people come in the summer and do that, as well as we have incredible food in Charleston. And so
you sure
anytime
do.
you come, you're going to have like great barbecue, great seafood, local breweries. We're always number one in some type of hospitality, tourism, food and bev type of thing. So you can really enjoy some great food in the summer, as well as some really lush gardens and swamp life. I would say in the fall, we have a lot of red and yellow in the gardens. It's a nice time to see wildlife because it's not so hot anymore. The fall and towards the end of fall, as we go into winter, is also prime oyster season. There's kind of an urban legend that grew into reality that months that end in R, so October, November, December, a little bit of January, it's the best time to eat Lowcountry oysters because the water's not so warm that they grow bacteria. It's nice and cold, and then we love to do oyster roasts. So that's a huge thing in Charleston. And the climate is, if it snows up in Boston, my parents will send me a picture and it's only raining here. So it's really not bad. And once you escape that kind of hurricane-y season, it's nice and temperate as well. And so you get to see some really pretty winter blooms, as well as some of the historic homes dressed up for the holidays and enjoy maybe an oyster roast. So there's always things to do beyond, you come to Magnolia for half of your day, and then the city of Charleston always has something going on. And our house tour runs all year, so any history buff can come any time of the year and enjoy that tour as well.
Perfect. If I was showing up today, where would I want to go? What are the high points? What might I want to see? What is the significance of some of those spots?
I would definitely dedicate at least 3 hours to spend with us, because there is so much to see and do. We have miles of walking and biking trails. We just launched a free app that kind of has some self-guided tours. So whether you want to see camellias, whether you want to know the best places to maybe see an alligator, it's all loaded in our app, and you can kind of pre-plan and customize your day that way. So you are also so welcome to wander and look up and get lost type of vibe when you come explore the gardens. But sometimes it's nice to have a plan a little bit and kind of see some of our favorite spots, which is how we populate the app. Our horticulture team, our ecology team, has really spent a lot of time putting in the must-sees. And so taking a walk through the gardens, maybe if you brought your dog, we're dog friendly, so we love to have them. I would also definitely recommend hopping on our nature train. It's going to take you through kind of part of the swamp and really tell you some deep history about the land and how it came to be what it is, and what you're driving through and what it used to be. And they'll be able to point out different species of birds or things that are really unique to the Charleston area. And you do get pretty up close and personal with some wildlife. And that stops, it stops at the house and it stops at the swamp as well. So you're able to kind of hop on and hop off and maybe walk through the swamp if you're really looking for some reptiles, maybe hop off at the house and get on an afternoon house tour and learn more about the family and see some cool historical artifacts. Stop by the cafe and get a glass of rosé as you visit the wildlife center and the color display gardens. So that would be my perfect day. And then, you have to walk back to your car and you're able to pass the From Slavery to Freedom tour on your way, kind of round out your day with a little bit more perspective and some education, and then go get incredible fried chicken and oysters downtown. That would be my Magnolia day.
That is, I think, the perfect day in general.
I know. It's like every time I have somebody visit, they're like, well, what should we do? I'm like, just come see me at work. We'll do the roundabout.
Let's talk a little bit about this is going to sound a little funny, right? But the Instagrammable spot that I'm always seeing, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, is your bridge.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that and why people are, obviously maybe not why, right? Because it's because it's gorgeous, but tell us about why that's significant.
So the Long White Bridge dates back to the 1800s, and it's one of many bridges. We have so many bridges. We have
that's
tons.
Fascinating. I had no idea.
We have lots because we have all these secret little gardens and areas and waterways. And so we have lots of bridges. This bridge is just the most popular. It's one of the longer ones, and it is so centrally located, so you can't really miss it as you walk by. And it is in a really perfect spot with so much Spanish moss, and you've got, some color blooming in, and it's so popular for our wedding couples. It's just really picturesque, and it's right next to the Magnolia house. And so people are obsessed, and I don't really blame them. It's a gorgeous photo spot any time of the year. Around the holidays, we put some wreaths on it. It's just in a great spot. Yeah. So I don't blame people at all. And it's definitely popular for weddings, and it's just popular in general. But it's one of many bridges. So I encourage people to find the other ones too, because they're different colors and there's different scenery around them. So maybe there's some bamboo, or there's some pink and orange flowers, or there's lots of bridges. But that one seems to be the favorite.
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad I asked, because I never would have known there were other bridges at all. Yeah. I always see that one. So that's perfect. Now let's talk a little bit. I know you mentioned you have a little bit of an event background, so I'm sure you're well versed in some of the more traditional annual things that are going on at the Plantation and Gardens. So could you tell us, maybe not things that are like one time, right? But if
Yeah.
people over the next like couple of years are planning on visiting the area, they want to stop in and, varying seasons, what are some
Mhm.
things that are going on that they could look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are definitely some big community events that we love to host every year. Namely, that would be our Ladybug Day, which is every summer, and our Easter egg hunt, which is every spring. We hide 20,000 Easter eggs for kids of all ages to go and search for. And this is during our big chameleon azalea bloom. So it's really gorgeous out in the gardens. It's a really sweet day for families. And even if you're visiting, it's a nice time to come. Our Ladybug Day this is our 11th year, so it's definitely something that we're going to keep going. And it is such a local favorite. And if you're here in the summer and you stumble upon it, it's a really wonderful surprise. We basically allow people to go out into the gardens with a little cup of ladybugs and spread the ladybugs because they are so helpful in, warding off maybe some harmful little pests and helping our flowers bloom in the summer going into the fall. And so kids, adults, everybody loves to release ladybugs, and it's really just something so unique. And it's kind of a peek into our horticultural process and our ecological process, and you learn a little bit more about how to keep gardens alive, and you get to be a part of that. And I think that's really special and cool. So those are two of my favorite annual events that we do. But we always like to host things throughout the year. Maybe we do some wine strolls, maybe we do some food and beverage style events, maybe we are bringing in yoga in the garden, sunrise sunset yoga, as well as like hosting people's weddings and special events. And it's a gorgeous picturesque spot for all of this, and so anything that we can celebrate, we try to.
I love it. That's kind of my life motto. So
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm so impressed with the Ladybug Day because that is such a brilliant way to give the layperson some semblance of ownership and ecological stewardship. To tie
Yeah.
people into, not just tell them about it, right? But to give them the experience to be a part of that and why it's
Yeah.
important for the space and even for them particularly if they're living in the area, love it. That is brilliant.
Right. And
I
I feel
hope,
like it's something
yeah,
so unique to this area. So, like everywhere in the world, you can go to a holiday market or something like that. And sure, we might do that here and there. And of course, we do things around the holidays, but this is so unique to this garden. And it gives you some type of ownership. It gives you some type of pride to have been a part of this. And it's really super relevant to Magnolia and to us. And that's important too, that we have our own identity and we celebrate that and bring in the public where we can. It's the same reason that we enjoy hosting a Juneteenth event and all of that.
I love that. So on the subject of stewardship, and I know we talked briefly about some preservation, is there anything happening right now preservation wise?
Preservation is just an ongoing value for us, and it's something that's always in our mind, and it's such a huge property that there's always something that
There's,
we're working on, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
that makes sense. Well, Kayla, thank you so much for doing this. This is amazing. Like I mentioned, I'm eager to get out there in Charleston in general again, because what a gorgeous area, but particularly to Magnolia Plantation Gardens because it is stunning from what I've seen. And the history just makes it all that much better, knowing that it's literally an oasis for people and animals. So thank you for being here and telling us all about it.
Thank you for having me. It was so nice to share and nerd out a little bit about history and where I work. And I'm so proud of this place and would love everybody to come see it and experience it and have their own kind of takeaway from it. So I'm so happy to be here.